National Electrical Code Section 110.26 addresses workspace about electrical equipment operating at 600 volts, nominal, or less to ground. It focuses on providing sufficient space for personnel to safely operate and maintain the equipment. The code specifies requirements for clear working space, access, and illumination. Considering the installation of a 120/240 volt, 100 amp subpanel at the bottom of a stairway, several aspects of Section 110.26 become relevant. Firstly, regarding working space, 110.26 dictates the depth of the working space and the direction of access to live parts. This depth is determined by the voltage to ground and the condition of the space opposite the equipment. For a 120/240 volt system, the voltage to ground is 120 volts. Condition 1. Where there is exposed live parts on one side and no live or grounded parts on the other side of the working space, or where there are exposed live parts on both sides effectively guarded by suitable wood or similar insulating material, requires a minimum depth of 3 feet or 900 millimeters. Condition 2. Where there are exposed live parts on one side and grounded parts on the other side, requires a working space depth of 3 feet 6 inches or 1.1 meters. Condition 3. Where there are exposed live parts on both sides of the workspace and the operators is not suitably guarded, requires a working space depth of 4 feet or 1.2 meters. It's important to note that these dimensions are minimums, and more space may be necessary depending on the specific installation. In the scenario described, having 30 inches of clearance to the stairs may not meet the minimum depth requirement specified in 110.26a depending on the condition present. Secondly, width of working space is also a critical aspect of 110.26. Section 110.26b states that the width of the working space in front of the electrical equipment shall be the width of the equipment or 30 inches, 750 millimeters, whichever is greater. This width must allow for safe operation and maintenance of the equipment. The description indicates there is a landing area providing the workspace. It's essential to ensure that the landing provides at least 30 inches of clear width centered on the equipment. Thirdly, 110.26c addresses the height of working space. The working space must be clear and extend from the grade, floor, or platform to a height of at least 6 feet 6 inches or 2 meters or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. This requirement ensures adequate headroom for personnel working on the equipment. Fourthly, 110.26e covers access and egress. It states that at least one entrance of sufficient area shall give access to an egress from the working space. For equipment rated 1200 amps or more and over 6 feet wide that contains overcurrent devices, there must be an entrance at each end of the working space. The door must open at least 90 degrees. This section emphasizes the importance of having a clear and unobstructed path to and from the working space. In the context of the stairway, it's crucial that the access to the subpanel does not involve navigating an unsafe or obstructed path. Fifthly, illumination is addressed in 110.26d. Adequate illumination must be provided for all working spaces about electrical equipment. The lighting should be arranged to minimize shadows and ensure clear visibility of the equipment and the surrounding area. This is particularly important in a location like the bottom of a stairway, where natural light may be limited. Now, let's consider the specific points raised in the question. The subpanel is rated at 120/240 volts, 100 amps. This voltage level falls within the scope of 110.26, which applies to equipment operating at 600 volts or less. The 30 inches of clearance to the stairs may not meet the minimum depth requirement for working space, which is generally 3 feet or 3 feet 6 inches, depending on the conditions opposite the equipment. The workspace being in the landing is acceptable, provided that the landing meets the requirements for width, height, and clear access. The fact that the stairway is not well traveled does not waive the requirement of 110.26. The code applies regardless of the frequency of access to the equipment. In summary, to determine whether the subpanel installation complies with 110.26, one must firstly measure the depth of the working space in front of the equipment and ensure it meets the minimum requirements based on voltage to ground and the conditions opposite the equipment. Secondly, confirm that the width of the working space is at least 30 inches or the width of the equipment, whichever is greater. Thirdly, verify that the height of the working space is at least 6 feet, 6 inches or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. Fourthly, ensure that there is clear and unobstructed access to and egress from the working space. Fifthly, provide adequate illumination in the working space. If all of these conditions are met, then the subpanel installation would likely comply with 110.26. However, it's always recommended to consult with a qualified electrical inspector or engineer to ensure full compliance with all applicable codes and standards. Now let's look at a few other considerations. The first is regarding the physical protection of the subpanel. While not explicitly covered in 110.26, the National Electrical Code requires that electrical equipment be protected from physical damage as per 110.27. Installing the subpanel at the bottom of a stairway might expose it to potential damage from objects being carried up or down the stairs. Appropriate measures, such as installing a barrier or enclosure, may be necessary to protect the equipment. The second is about local amendments and interpretations. It is crucial to be aware that local jurisdictions may have amendments to the National Electrical Code or specific interpretations of its requirements. These local regulations can be more stringent than the national code and must be followed. Checking with the local electrical inspector's office is always advisable to ensure compliance with all applicable rules. The third thing to consider is about future accessibility. While the current access to the subpanel may meet the code requirements, it's important to consider potential future changes. If the stairway is modified or if other equipment is installed in the area, it could affect the accessibility or working space around the subpanel. Planning for future contingencies can help prevent code violations and ensure continued safe operation of the electrical system. The fourth thing to consider is about proper labeling. The National Electrical Code requires that electrical equipment be properly labeled to identify its purpose and function as per 110.21. The subpanel should be clearly labeled with its voltage, amperage, and the circuits it serves. This information is essential for safe operation and maintenance of the electrical system. The fifth thing to consider is about qualified personnel. Electrical work should only be performed by qualified personnel who are familiar with the National Electrical Code and other applicable standards as per 110.24. Improperly installed or maintained electrical equipment can pose a significant safety hazard. Hiring a licensed electrician is always recommended to ensure that the work is done safely and correctly. The sixth thing to consider is about load calculations. Before installing a subpanel, it's essential to perform a load calculation to determine the appropriate size of the panel and its overcurrent protection. Overloading the panel can lead to overheating, damage to equipment, and potentially fires as per 220. The load calculation should take into account all of the circuits that will be connected to the panel, including lighting, receptacles, and appliances. The seventh thing to consider is about grounding and bonding. Proper grounding and bonding are essential for electrical safety as per 250. The subpanel must be properly grounded to the main electrical service and all metallic parts of the electrical system must be bonded together to create a low impedance path for fault currents. Improper grounding and bonding can increase the risk of electric shock and fire. The eighth thing to consider is about overcurrent protection. The subpanel must be protected by an overcurrent device, such as a circuit breaker or fuse, that is sized appropriately for the panel's ampacity as per 240. The overcurrent device should be located in the main electrical service panel and should be readily accessible. The overcurrent device protects the subpanel and the circuits it serves from overloads and short circuits. Let's delve into a few more important aspects related to installing a subpanel, particularly concerning safety and compliance with the National Electrical Code. Firstly, arc flash hazard analysis is a crucial consideration. While the National Electrical Code doesn't explicitly mandate arc flash hazard analysis for all subpanel installations, it's a highly recommended practice, especially in commercial and industrial settings. An arc flash is a dangerous electrical explosion that can occur when there's a fault in the electrical system. It can cause severe burns, injuries, and even death. Performing an arc flash hazard analysis helps determine the potential arc flash hazard levels and identify appropriate personal protective equipment (PPE) requirements for personnel working on or near the subpanel. Secondly, surge protection is also something to think about. Installing surge protection devices (SPD) at the subpanel can help protect sensitive electronic equipment from voltage surges caused by lightning strikes, utility switching, or other electrical disturbances as per 285. Surges can damage or destroy electronic devices, leading to costly repairs or replacements. SPD divert excess voltage away from the equipment, protecting it from damage. Thirdly, the type of wiring method is a critical aspect of the installation. The National Electrical Code specifies different wiring methods that are permitted for different applications as per 300. For example, non-metallic sheathed cable Romex is commonly used for residential wiring, while conduit is often used for commercial and industrial wiring. The choice of wiring method depends on factors such as the environment, the type of building construction, and the voltage and current levels. It's important to select a wiring method that is suitable for the specific application and that complies with all applicable code requirements. Fourthly, the proper support and securing of cables and conduits is also something to consider. The National Electrical Code requires that cables and conduits be properly supported and secured to prevent them from being damaged or creating a safety hazard. Cables must be supported at intervals specified in the code, and conduits must be securely fastened to walls or ceilings. Improperly supported cables and conduits can sag, become damaged, and create a tripping hazard or electrical shock hazard. Fifthly, the use of approved equipment is a vital aspect of ensuring safety and compliance. The National Electrical Code requires that all electrical equipment be approved for its intended use as per 110.3. Approved equipment has been tested and certified by a recognized testing laboratory such as Underwriters Laboratories UL or Intertech UTL to meet safety standards. Using approved equipment helps ensure that it is safe and reliable and that it will perform as intended. Sixthly, the coordination of overcurrent protection devices is essential for preventing nuisance tripping and ensuring selective coordination. Selective coordination means that only the overcurrent device closest to the fault should trip, while other upstream devices remain closed. This helps prevent unnecessary power outages and minimizes the impact of electrical faults. Proper coordination of overcurrent protection devices requires careful selection and sizing of the devices, as well as coordination studies to ensure that they will operate as intended. Seventhly, the inspection and testing of the installation is a crucial step in verifying that it complies with all applicable code requirements and that it is safe to operate. A qualified electrical inspector should inspect the installation before it is energized to ensure that it meets all code requirements. The inspector will check for things such as proper wiring methods, grounding and bonding, overcurrent protection, and clearances. After the installation has been inspected and approved, it should be tested to verify that it is functioning properly. Testing may include things such as voltage measurements, continuity tests, and ground impedance tests. The eighth and final thing to consider is about documentation and record keeping. Maintaining accurate documentation and records of the subpanel installation is essential for future maintenance, troubleshooting, and modifications. Documentation should include things such as the panel schedule, wiring diagrams, load calculations, and inspection reports. Records should be kept in a safe place and should be readily accessible to qualified personnel. Proper documentation and record keeping can help ensure that the electrical system is maintained in a safe and reliable condition over its entire lifespan. In summary, when installing a subpanel, it's crucial to consider arc flash hazards, surge protection, wiring methods, support and securing of cables and conduits, the use of approved equipment, coordination of overcurrent protection devices, inspection and testing of the installation, and documentation and record keeping. By following these guidelines and complying with all applicable code requirements, you can ensure that the subpanel installation is safe, reliable, and compliant with the National Electrical Code.